Welcome to Desert Island Discs, a whole new season where we're going to meet a whole new bunch of beaverites and find out what they would take to their desert island. Thank you, Michael, for joining us tonight from a mountain somewhere in France to a desert island on a mountain somewhere in France to share your choices with us. So really excited to find out what you have chosen for your movie, your book, your song and your verse. Oh, perfect. You've got Desert Island. We're properly in the ambience now. Shall we start first of all with tell us about the book you have chosen?
Well, Karen and I have been in a book club that we sort of helped start about 17 years now. And there are about 8 or 9 of us. And over that period of time, we've read about 150 or 160 books. And I was thinking back, what book really made me think? Changed my way of thinking. And it is a book that is short. It's called The Bridge of San Luis Rey. And it's by a guy called Thornton Wilder. He wrote this just coming out of World War I. And obviously there was the whole issue of where was faith, where was God and all of this stuff. And there were people trying to explain it away, as God was on our side, God was on their side. So Wilder takes just over 100 pages to talk about a catastrophe that happened in 1714 when a bridge collapsed in Lima. Now, that bridge actually did exist. It was built about 1100 by the Incas. And this bridge collapsed with 5 people on it. And it was witnessed by a friar called Juniper. And he actually was on his way to the bridge, stopped because he was tired, and then witnessed the bridge collapsing, taking 5 people with it. And the rest of the book is about this priest trying to work out how this was God's will. He believed it was. He believed theology was science. And he took 6 years looking at the 5 people, examining their lives to find out why God killed them effectively.
Okay. Wow.
So the book is about each of the 5 people, and it's fascinating in as much as how he approached his theology, which happy to talk about.
Wow, that's incredible. So I'm in the happy position of I've never heard of the book or the author or the bridge or anything. So is it a true story or a fictionalized version of it?
It's not.
Okay.
When Wilder was interviewed, he was asked, were the people modeled on real people?
Okay.
And the people from the church, the religious hierarchy, were modeled on individuals. One of the Marchioness was also modeled on someone. And there's a singer in it who was modeled on a very famous Spanish singer who was touring Lima at the time. But he himself was teasing out this notion of, do things happen by accident? Or is there a plan? And it can't be both. So he was teasing people, I think, with it. And he spent 6 years doing that. He wrote a huge book. He was tried by the Spanish Inquisition and was burned at the stake. And his book was publicly burned. Okay. So the irony is the theology that he was trying to prove proved his downfall at the end of it. So there's a twist in the tale.
So is that why, I'm intrigued why the book was burned then? What was the...
Because I think the Spanish Inquisition said it was heresy. And I think because he spent 6 years doing this, because there were people who were within the church weren't written up particularly well, and because it took so much of his life, it subsumed him. And I think they also had issues with his theology that God would actively cause the death of people. The interesting thing for me, why it challenges me, is that two things. One is he created God in his own image. Because he did certain things, God did certain things, rather than the other way around.
Yeah.
But the other thing is, and this for me permeates this place I call home, God is a bit like a Jenga. And you construct him through all these bits of theology. And if you take one of the bricks out, the tower might begin to topple. And then you take another one out, and then you've heard the argument, we can't go there, that's the slippery slope. But as long as you create God in a scientific way, then you will fear something happening. And he could not fault, if his theology failed, God failed.
Yeah.
And he set out to prove he was right. And at the end, this beautiful quote from the abbess comes through. But soon we shall die, and all memory of those 5 people will have left the earth. But we ourselves shall be loved for a while and forgotten. But the love will have been enough. All those impulses of love return to the love that made them. Even memory is not necessary for love. There is a land of the living and a land of the dead, and the bridge is love. The only survival, the only meaning is love.
Wow.
That sort of finishes the book. So
That's
there, the
awesome.
church,
So
the abbess,
the
was
bridge is both
actually
the
showing
actual
real, yeah,
physical, yeah,
absolutely, yeah, of love.
but also, yeah, the bridge is love. What a brilliant way to end.
And the bridge, yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Good stuff. Right. Good choice. On now to your song.
I struggled with this because, you know, I don't play an instrument, but I've sung in a choir and I love music. And I grew up in a period whenever, you know, the 3 minute track was going, and we started to begin to hear 4 and 5 minutes on the radio. And so, you know, I started band records probably in 1971 when I started, 72 when I started earning money. And I was influenced heavily by the life of Eric Clapton, you know, right from his early beginnings through John Mayall and the Blues Breakers and so on. So I was thinking, what did I pick? And then actually it struck me. I was 2 years ago in Tenerife with Karen, and we were in a restaurant, and there was a piece of music played, and I ended up in tears because the piece of music was called The Old Lamplighter. And my dad used to sing it to me as I was going to sleep.
Wow.
And it said two things to me. There's a couple of things in the world don't need words. One is pictures and the other is music. I was in Uganda in a cattle camp, and this guy who had no English was standing there with his warriors. And there was an Englishman who came out, and he sang an aria in Italian to these people, and they were in tears. And they could not understand the English or the Italian, but the music touched their soul. So for me, music brings you back to where you first heard it. It's like a smell, you know, you're just there.
Yeah.
And that can be the same with Christian music, but in this case, the Lamplighter, I remember my dad singing it to me. And every time I hear it, I remember, you know, the gaslight in my aunt's house.
Yeah.
Because it had to be lit.
Yeah.
And I remember my dad talking about the gaslighter and then him singing it. So it's a great song.
I'm old enough to remember gaslights. We used to, for our summer holidays, go up to a little cottage that had no electricity and lighting the tilly lamp. That was the excitement of whoever it was that got to light the tilly lamp. And we were like fighting over it. And that was, it's not a million years since Belfast would have had a lamplighter roaming the streets. Would that have been?
Early 50s. I mean, there were still apparently there were still lamplighters in some areas of the city in the 1950s.
Let's listen to just a little clip of the song. So the clip that I found is from a movie. Was the song originally written for the movie, or
no? It was actually not. Gene Autry, who sings it in this piece, was the second reason. Is my dad loved Gene Autry.
Okay.
He was the singing cowboy.
Okay.
And he started off on a rodeo.
Yeah.
And then he ended up starring in 98 films. And he actually sings in this as a lamplighter's in the background.
Then good luck, senor. All my wishes and my prayers go with you.
He made the night a little brighter wherever he would go. The old lamplighter of long, long ago. His snowy hair was so much whiter beneath the candle glow. The old lamplighter of long, long ago.
The other thing that struck me was, I've privileged, like a lot of people, that my memories of both my parents who have now died are good ones. And I can remember when my dad died, which was 2005, there was someone who was working with me, and they said to me, "Oh, he died very quickly," which he did. I'm sure there's lots of things you would have loved if you regretted not saying to him. And I thought about it for a minute, and there isn't. There's nothing. That's not the same thing as saying I wouldn't love him here to talk to.
Yeah.
And then I thought, how many people have either not been there when someone's died during COVID, had a bad experience of a parent. And I think we don't take enough time just to thank God for the passing on to the next generation of love.
Yeah.
And that song just reminds me, my dad, was a guy who worked with his hands all his life, came home at the end of the day tired, but still come up and lay in the bed and sang me to sleep.
And he sang that? That's awesome. What did your dad do?
He was a boilermaker, so he actually died, including pleural plaque. He was inside boilers, with asbestos and all sorts of stuff in the days when that wasn't really sort of said to be anything wrong.
Yeah.
But he wouldn't have changed it, so he would have climbed big chimneys and so on, a bit of a daredevil. And of course, that comes off of me, ha ha ha.
Yeah.
So it's just about thankfulness and about remembering and taking time.
Yeah.
Streaming doesn't allow you to do that. Streaming. Yeah. How do you remember when you put something on, heard the crackles for the first time?
Yes, that's what we were originally looking for, the version of that song with all the hiss and the crackle of the old vinyl record behind it. But the only one we could find was the one from the movie. But the song is a good as well. I can't believe that we somehow managed to bypass it for the entire duration of our daily candles and Advent candles. What's the line in it? Make the night a little brighter or something.
The Browns are the famous version. He makes the light a little brighter wherever he may go. The old landowner, his snowy hair is so much whiter beneath the candle glow. And then it's on about singing about this guy who is invisible. Yeah. You don't know he's there, but the job that he does, there's a brilliant quote in Tom Sine's book that talks about things only happen through the conspiracy of the insignificant. And it's the notion of it's the people out of the spotlight that do the heavy lifting. Mm-hmm. I know that's very heavy, but I'm simply saying, don't ignore the people in the background.
Yeah, and wasn't that one of those jobs? The lamplighter was the oh gosh, I don't know what would be the equivalent, but it was one of those very kind of menial, unrewarded, unthanked, unrecognized kind of jobs. And yet, I'm sure for many, many decades, the difference it made to have a city glowing softly by gaslight was quite something. So
and he needed to be punctual.
Yeah,
and he got abuse if the light went out or the mantle was broken, and it wasn't his fault.
Yeah. Oh, amazing, brilliant. Right, good book, good song. Let's get on to your movie. So what's your choice?
Yeah, it's Invictus. And it's again for two reasons. Invictus is a Latin word, and it means undefeated or unconquered. And it was the poem that Nelson Mandela had at the back of his head that helped him through the 26 years in Robben Island. And it's also the Invictus Games, as you know, with Prince Harry and so on, and that going on.
Yeah.
And secondly, I just love Morgan Freeman. I think nobody else could have been Mandela in this film. And in fact, he was the first choice.
Yeah.
And I don't mind Matt Damon either, because I think he does Pinard very well, the Francois Pinard. So I picked it because it focuses on a thing I've worked in for 45, 50 years, which is division, and how through sport in this case, and through commitment and forgiveness, you can actually bridge the gap. And actually, difference isn't something to be afraid, but it's something to be embraced.
Yeah. See, back to your bridge. It's all connecting together. But is this again, much like your book, it's inspired by, or whatever.
It's a true story.
But it is a complete true story in this case, is it?
No, absolutely. When Mandela got out of jail after 26 years, he was elected president. Apartheid had just been stopped, and he went to see the Springboks play England, and the black South Africans were cheering on England and not the Springboks, and he couldn't get his head around this, and then realized through apartheid, Springboks had only one black player, a guy called Chester, who didn't make it for 6 matches because of knee strain, and therefore the black community didn't identify. So he went to see Francois Pinard, who is Matt Damon, and long story short, he said, "We're hosting the World Cup in 1995, the Rugby World Cup. I would like us to win."
I remember when I was invited to the 1992 Olympics in Barcelona. Everybody in the stadium greeted me with a song. At the time, the future our future seems very bleak. But to hear that song in the voices of people from all over our planet made me proud to be South African. It inspired me to come home and do better. It allowed me to expect more of myself.
May I ask, what was the song, sir?
Well, it was in Posisikilele, Africa. A very inspiring song. We need inspiration, Francois, because in order to build our nation, we must all exceed our own expectations.
So they put together a team of black and white. They actually then went into the townships for the first time and taught the kids how to play rugby.
Yeah.
And gradually, even the hardliners, when they visited Robben Island and saw the cell in which Mandela was, it changed their mentality.
You know, we seem to be so good at finding reasons to fall out. It can be the littlest thing. So what an incredible thing that for once he could just pick one of just a thing where you say, oh, it's only a game, it's only it's only a sport, and it's only one sport, but to just manage to find that one thing that could capture everybody in a journey towards working together and supporting each other, rather than finding yet another reason to split into tribes and split into my side and your side.
This is about the theology of the embrace.
Mm-hmm.
And, when you think of the troubles here, when people were shot or assassinated, the assassin normally wore a mask, and the person was normally shot in the back of the head, because you don't look into the eyes, because they then become human. You dehumanize them by doing all the other stuff.
Yeah.
And the white South Africans had dehumanized. And in fact, the Dutch the Dutch Reformed Church, in some cases, had justified apartheid back to, the birth of Abraham and Isaac in the Old Testament, and justified the fact they were second-class citizens. So Christians colluded with this. And I think what I have learned is that there is a scale that moves you from just saying I like something and you like something and that's all right, to I prefer something and you prefer something else. That's still all right, but my preference is better than yours, and then eventually your preference has no place.
Yes.
Now that sliding scale is very easy, and it's not necessarily single mindset. You can be like that on football, in a joking sense. Man City, ridiculous. But the seriousness is, it is very easy, unless you've walked a mile in the other person's shoes, to believe the stereotype. But for me, the theology of embrace, that is the willingness to admit you're not always right.
That's
and
awesome.
That the opposite of faith isn't doubt, but it's certainty. And I don't have certainty as a Christian about everything. I'm still learning about God. And the arrogance then that comes if you think my way is the only way. And in this case, Mandela, like the Dalai Lama, said when he got up in the morning, if he could still love his jailer, he knew he was on the right track.
And have you met the Dalai Lama?
I have, and
I had to throw you that question at some stage.
He's just an amazing man, and he turns his ability to turn a question back. So you ask a question, and he'll then say, "But do you not think that?" And then it comes back to you, that empowers you, because you believe that you've actually. It's like, oh, you know that John Stop thinks the same as I do. Rather than that sort of thing. But that was what he said when he was in jail, and he wakened up in the morning. If he didn't believe he could bless the guard, he actually needed to go back and think about his life all over again.
Wow, that's incredible.
There was an interesting thing whenever apartheid ended, and 92, I think it was, they began the Rugby Commission and wanted to rename the Springboks because of all the ties, and Mandela said no. And he had to work for 3 or 4 months to lobby enough support to get the vote on the commission to retain the name, because he wanted to say we have nothing to fear from the name, because by changing the name you're erasing the history. But what we want to do is to change it, retain the name, but to change the essence, the values of it. Now that flipped me, because we had it here with the PSNI RUC, the whole issue about how do we try to move ahead. So we renamed the police, that's not right or wrong or indifferent, it just happened.
Yeah.
Other countries have done similar things, but Mandela said absolutely not, which was exceeding his own expectations of himself, I'm sure.
Completely. And I wondered, did the whole thing, as it progressed from being a bright idea to becoming this kind of movement, did it go even better than he maybe dreamt that it would, especially as it came into their hopes that they actually might win?
Well, he was actually negotiating a trade deal when the semi-finals took place.
Okay.
So he wasn't actually in the country.
Okay. Right.
But when you read the stuff and hear about how he talked about it, that was 91, and 95 was the Rugby World Cup, and he wanted them to win. But the very fact as a byproduct, he through Pinar, decided that these men who'd never been in an African village went out and actually taught these kids how to play rugby.
Yeah.
And by the second match, black and white, 60,000 black and white South Africans were cheering on the Springboks. It took the first match before they really, is this real?
Yeah.
But by the second match, they actually had this, it was just amazing. Difference was being celebrated in that.
Has he got it?
Sister, will you lead us in a prayer?
Thanks, Lord, for getting us into this final. Thanks for no serious injuries. And most of all, thanks for the win. Amen.
Amen.
I love that detail of the way everyone who is when they're shaking hands, and if it's there's that kind of kind of awkwardness about it. It's it isn't suddenly that everybody is fast friends for life. There's still that recognition, even that in that moment of elation. There's a recognition that there's still a journey to take.
That bit about Mandela wearing the Springbok jersey and hat's true.
Yeah.
And he presented the Webb Ellis Trophy to Pinar wearing it.
Okay.
And when he came into the stadium with it all on, they all started shouting Nelson, Nelson, Nelson. Every one of the 60,000 people, black and white, waving their flags.
Yeah. Interesting as well. Is that true? Do you know that it's interesting that the team having a little prayer got such a kind of prominent place in the movie?
I think it probably was true because a lot of those white South Africans would have been brought up in the Dutch Reform tradition.
Yeah.
And it's a prayer scrum, which is a great idea, I think.
Yeah.
But I thought it was brilliant touch, the very fact that there was a God spot in it.
Yeah.
And it's not added in as a grace note. It's not there just simply as a byproduct.
Mm-hmm.
It was actually a main point of giving thanks and praying for the victory, which is brilliant.
Yeah. Amazing. Right. And then, so to finish off, before we leave Invictus, we can't not show the last minute of the movie. So do you want to sort of tell us what's going on here before I play the clip?
I think, is this the bit in the car? where he's
No, it's the bit when Pienaar is visiting the cell where Mandela spent all of those years, and then we hear Morgan Freeman reading out the poem in true Morgan Freeman style.
Because this is part of the issue, was that the white South Africans had never walked in the shoes, and Mandela talked very little about the small cell in Robben Island where he was, I think, 17 of the 26 years, but obviously the team visited. But this is a piece where I think Pienaar is on his own and he's just thinking about this stuff.
Yeah.
And then he hears the voice of Morgan Freeman, aka Mandela, in the background, which is just wonderful. Poetic license, but wonderful.
Yeah, completely. Yes, because how could you not have Morgan Freeman read out this poem? Get busy living, get busy. No, that's the other movie. But yeah.
Out of the night that covers me, black as the pit from pole to pole, I thank whatever gods may be for my unconquerable soul. In the fell clutch of circumstance, I have not winced nor cried aloud. Under the bludgeonings of fate, my head is bloody, but unbowed. Beyond this place of wrath and tears looms but the horror of the shade. And yet, the menace of the years binds and shall bind me, unafraid. It matters not how straight the gate, how charged with punishment the scroll. I am the master of my fate. I am the captain of my soul.
Oh, fabulous. Brilliant. Right, Michael, finally, shall we move on to the verse you chose?
I love the Psalms, and it's Psalm 46, verse 10. And the context is probably David was facing the Assyrians, because obviously Assyria came and then the Babylonians came, and they were huge, and Israel was a bit like a little strip of land over which the big nations came to defeat the nations either south or north, and they'd been changed hands so many times. And David's obviously reflecting on what it's like, a bit like Morgan Freeman was in Invictus. What it's
I was just thinking this isn't a million miles
that's
away.
That's the theme. It's under duress. He starts the psalm off by saying, God is our presence and strength, a very, steady rock in times of. And Hebrew doesn't have a verb in there. It's God, strength. And therefore, in the Hebrew mind, that was both present and future. So God will be our strength because he always has been. And then he goes through this beautiful idea about even though earthquakes happen and tidal waves happen, there's beautiful imagery. And even though all this stuff's going on, God's still God. And then halfway through he says Selah, which really sort of means, what about that then, stand back in amazement. But in Psalm 46, verse 10, a very short psalm, he says, be still and know that I am God. Now, the Hebrew word for be still could be translated stop fighting, cease fighting. It's a command. There's no option in this. He says, I like to translate it, step out of the traffic. When you're so busy, when all the white noise is there, do whatever you can do to stop all that stuff, get your head cleared, stop fighting in the sense of metaphor. And then he says another beautiful Hebrew word, which is yada, which means know that I am God. That was the word that was mentioned when Adam knew Eve in the sexual sense, but also when God knew Noah. So that word means both the intimacy of a physical relationship and the spirituality that links people's souls. And David said, despite all this stuff that's going on outside, stop. And not just intellectually, not just theoretically, but in your heart, have that knowledge that God is there.
It's almost like you put this all together beautifully, because that, that progression through all of the kind of theological struggles and doubts and questions of your book, and then through all of the kind of emotion of the song, and then through that real sense with the Morgan Freeman and the Mandela stuff, you know, just the difficulties of this world that's tearing itself apart, and how impossible the challenges seem sometimes. And then after all of that, just to come to this command to stop and rest in the reality of God. Oh, that's, yeah, brilliant. Good choices. So we are going to join Michael on the desert island, and just for a minute, just rest in that verse with the waves lapping against the shore.